Welcome to the frequency of sleepless stories, where the darkness speaks and the most primal fears awaken. Where are you right now? Maybe you are lying under the covers in your bedroom, driving on a deserted highway, or walking alone under flickering streetlights with your headphones plugged in. Wherever you are, try to stop for a second and listen to the silence around you. Listen very closely. In this modern world full of concrete and light, we often forget how terrifying the dark used to be for our ancestors. We forget why humanity rushed to find fire when the sun went down. But there are lands that never forget. Lands that time, technology, or neon lights can never touch. Tonight, I will take you to such a place where nature is not gentle at all, and silence is a living thing, always waiting to swallow you whole. Turn up the volume, pull up your blankets, and don't look out the window. This is a story about the blood rules of the ancient woods. The Appalachian Mountains are unlike any other mountains. They are old, older than fossilized bones, older than the formation of continents, and, according to some geologists, even older than the rings of Saturn. When you step deep into the dense forests of these mountains, you are not just stepping into the wilderness, you are stepping into a different timeline. The locals who have survived here for generations have always held an absolute reverence for this land. They whisper unwritten laws at the dinner table, survival rules that are never written on paper but are etched into their minds from childhood. If you see a buck standing on two legs staring at you, turn away and pretend you saw nothing. If you hear a loved one's voice calling from deep in the woods when you know for sure they aren't there, never answer. And above all, an absolute rule that must never be broken: never whistle in the woods at night. They say that sound cuts through the silence of the ancient forest like a beacon. It tells the things lurking in the shadows, "I am here. Come find me." This is the story of Liam, a man who accidentally broke that rule. Liam, a software engineer in his 30s from New York, knew nothing of these rules. The only thing he cared about was escaping the exhaustion of suffocating deadlines and glaring screens. He had rented a decaying wooden cabin, sitting isolated on a steep hillside in a branch of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was over 20 miles from the nearest town, with no cell service and no internet. Just him, an old fireplace, and absolute isolation. The first day passed peacefully. Liam read, chopped wood, and enjoyed the crisp air carrying the pungent scent of pine resin. But on the second night, the atmosphere changed. Around 2 in the morning, a sudden cold front rolled in. The temperature dropped rapidly, frosting the opaque window panes. The fireplace in the living room was down to its last dying, glowing embers. If he didn't want to freeze to death before dawn, Liam had to go out to the back porch to fetch more of the wood he had chopped that afternoon. He hastily threw on a thick puffer jacket, slipped into his leather boots, and grabbed an ultra-bright flashlight. As soon as Liam turned the doorknob and stepped outside, he immediately realized something was wrong. The silence. It wasn't the peace of nature. It was a deadly, thick, and heavy silence pressing against his eardrums. There was no wind blowing through the leaves, no chirping crickets, no hooting owls, and absolutely no rustling sounds of nocturnal animals scavenging. The ancient forest seemed to be holding its breath. It felt like that dead moment of silence from all creatures right before a massive predator appears. The bone-chilling cold and the overwhelming silence made the hairs on the back of Liam's neck stand up. The atmosphere was so suffocating that he felt the need to make some kind of noise to dispel the presence of the night, to prove that he still existed. An impulsive and unconscious act of a city dweller used to the noise. Liam pursed his lips and began to whistle. He whistled the familiar tune of "Take Me Home, Country Roads." The sharp whistling rang out, bizarrely bright and crisp, amidst the mute atmosphere, piercing the pitch-black night before him. He bent down to pick up 3 oak logs, tucked them under his arm, stopped whistling, and turned on his heel to head inside. And then, From deep within the tree line, about 50 meters away, a whistle answered back. Liam's feet turned to stone. The top log slipped from his grasp, landing with a soft thud on the thin layer of snow. It was the exact melody of "Take Me Home, Country Roads." In the first split second, Liam's brain tried to reassure him that it was just an echo, but he was standing on a hillside, facing an open forest. There were no cliffs to create an echo that would repeat after 3 whole seconds. Moreover, this sound was very wrong. It repeated his melody, but not smoothly. The whistle shrieked, high-pitched, razor-sharp, and sounded wet, as if it were squeezed out of a lipless mouth through jagged gaps in teeth. It was a forced, mocking mimicry that completely did not belong to a human. Liam's throat went dry. His heart pounded fiercely against his temples. He violently swung the beam of his flashlight into the pitch-black void ahead, but only saw bare tree trunks intertwining like bony fingers. "Hello?" Liam called out, his voice hoarse, trembling, and defensive. "Is anyone there?" No human voice answered. Instead, from the darkness, another whistle rose up. This time, it wasn't singing the song from before. It was copying the exact intonation, the hesitation, and the pitch of his words. "Hello? Is anyone there?" But entirely through sharp, screeching whistles. And it was closer. The sound came from about 30 meters away. Primal survival instincts flared, screaming in Liam's head to run. He took a step back, the heel of his boot crushing a dry branch with a loud snap. Instantly, from the night, the whistling erupted into a shrill barrage of sound, perfectly mimicking the snapping branch. It was mocking him. It was playing with its prey before striking. Absolute panic shattered his paralysis. Liam dropped the remaining logs, spun around, and dashed like a madman toward the cabin door. At the same time, in the bushes, something began to move. It wasn't hiding anymore. The sound of crushing branches and leaves roared. It wasn't the steady footsteps of a man, nor the rhythmic running of a bear. It was the sound of long, heavy claws plunging into the dirt. Its rhythm of movement was chaotic and disgustingly distorted, like something tall trying to take long strides on 2 legs while simultaneously dragging itself on all 4s. It was charging at a terrifying speed. Accompanied by those deformed footsteps was a barrage of frantic whistling. This time, there was no melody, just high-pitched, screeching sounds, chaotically overlapping each other as if the creature had more than one mouth and they were all whistling at the same time. 5 meters, 3 meters. Liam threw himself over the steps, lunged into the cabin, and used all his strength to slam the solid oak door shut. He frantically threw the heavy iron bolt and locked both deadbolts. Once done, he backed away, sliding down the stone wall of the fireplace and collapsing onto the floor, clutching his chest as he gasped for air. Outside, all sounds abruptly ceased. The Appalachian forest sank back into its signature thick silence. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The fireplace had died out long ago. The cold began to seep into his flesh, but cold sweat still poured down Liam's forehead. He sat still in the darkness, his hands rigidly gripping the wooden floor. He started to lie to himself that maybe it was just a wild animal, that it was gone, until he heard a slow, gentle scratching sound coming from the glass window to his left. The blood in Liam's veins turned to ice. He slowly turned his head to look. The window pane was pitch black, but thanks to the pale moonlight filtering through the clouds, he could see it. A massive, dark silhouette blocked the entire frame. It had a vaguely human shape, but its neck hung down unnaturally long, and its head was tilted and bent right up against the glass. It was trying to look inside, and then, right by the crack of the wooden frame, where sound could slip through, a voice spoke. Not a whistle. This time, it was a human voice. It was exactly Liam's voice. His pitch, his raspiness, His utter terror played back exactly like a broken cassette tape. "Hello? Is anyone there?" Liam clamped both hands over his ears, squeezed his eyes shut, and bit his lip until it bled to stop himself from letting out any screams. He knew if he made one more sound, the thing out there would know exactly where he was. The scratching on the glass dragged on for a few more minutes. The creature shrieked out another barrage of sharp, drawn-out whistles, creeping through every crack of the wooden cabin, before finally fading away and sinking into the deep darkness of the ancient forest. That night, Liam didn't sleep. He sat huddled in a corner until the blinding morning sun hit the window. Without packing a single thing, he bolted straight to his car, started the engine, and drove wildly down the trail, not daring to glance in the rearview mirror even once. He made it back to New York alive, but his mind never truly left that place. Even now, whenever night falls, despite being in a luxury apartment surrounded by the noise of city traffic, occasionally, amidst the wind whistling through the window cracks, he swears he still hears that melody, cold, distorted, and inching closer. Ancient forests do not belong to us. We are merely accidental trespassers in territories that time has forgotten. The silence there is not an emptiness, but a suit of armor. It hides the predators. So, if you ever find yourself wandering deep into the woods after the sun goes down, no matter how much the cold and silence make you panic, please keep your mouth shut. Make no sound and never whistle, because you will never be able to predict what in the darkness is waiting to answer you. Wishing you a peaceful night. The broadcast station will now disconnect. I used to work as a search and rescue SAR officer in a national park, spanning thousands of hectares. I won't disclose the specific name of the forest for my own safety, and also because my old boss would find a way to silence me if he ever found out. Over my 5 years on the job, I saved a lot of people. Lost hikers, hunters with broken legs, or drunk teenagers wandering in the night. You might think a national park is just a place for camping, a display of majestic nature. But the truth is, the deeper you go into the woods, the more the line between reality and illusion blurs. There are things we found in the forest that we were never allowed to put into our official reports. Things that shatter all scientific logic and human reason. Today, I have decided to break that rule of silence. If you work in this field long enough, you start to notice a bizarre pattern among missing persons. Some people vanish in the blink of an eye. In my second year on the job, we received a report of a 4-year-old boy who wandered off while picking raspberries with his family. We mobilized the K9 unit and fanned out to search. About 4 hours later, my radio crackled. The captain reported they had found the boy. But the problem was his location. The boy was found sitting on a rocky outcropping, jutting from a sheer cliff face, about 15 kilometers away from where his family reported him missing. For a fully equipped adult to hike there through the dense forest terrain, it would take at least a day and a half. Yet a 4-year-old child was there after only 4 hours? Stranger still, when we rappelled down to lift the boy up, he wasn't panicked or crying at all. He wasn't wearing shoes, but his heels were perfectly clean, not a single scratch or speck of mud, as if he had never even touched the ground. When I asked him how he got up there, the boy just smiled innocently and said, "The bear man, with big red eyes, carried me on his back and flew up here. He told me to wait here so he could go find more friends for me." My captain's face instantly darkened. He snatched the radio, switched to an encrypted frequency, and said only one sentence: "Situation X. Immediately withdraw all forces back to camp." From then on, none of us were ever allowed to mention it again. It's not just anomalous creatures. The deep woods also harbor things so illogical they make your skin crawl. You might have heard rumors on the internet about mysterious stairs in the woods. I can confirm for you, they are real. They usually appear in the deepest areas where cell phone signals never reach. Sometimes, you are pushing your way through a dense thicket, and suddenly, right in the middle of a clearing, there is a staircase. There are no ruined houses around, no traces of a foundation. Just a solitary, perfect staircase, as if someone had just cut and pasted it from another dimension right into the middle of the forest. Some are made of old oak. Some are covered in red velvet carpet like in an antique mansion. And some are wrought iron spiral staircases. The first time I saw such a structure, I stepped forward to investigate. The veteran captain with me instantly grabbed my collar, yanking me back so hard I fell flat on the ground. He gritted his teeth, his eyes filled with absolute terror, and warned me to never go near them and absolutely never step on them. He didn't explain why. But one time, a rookie, driven by curiosity, secretly touched the top step of a rotting wooden staircase. The exact moment his hand touched the wood, all sound in the forest suddenly died. No more birds. No more wind. A deadly silence descended, making our ears ring painfully. The rookie began bleeding profusely from his nose, collapsed, and started vomiting. He had to resign that very week due to a severe neurological condition that no doctor could ever diagnose. I tried to ignore all those bizarre occurrences to continue my job of saving lives right up until that fateful night shift. That was when I realized I couldn't stay in this forest for another second. That night, I was assigned to patrol the northern boundary, an area famous for its sheer cliffs. It was pitch black, the surroundings only dimly lit by the flickering flashlight in my hand. Suddenly, I heard a faint cry for help echoing through the trees. "Help! Is anyone there? My leg is broken." It was a male voice, coming from a dark ravine about 50 meters away. Professional instinct urged me to run toward it. But after taking just a few steps, I froze. My blood ran cold. That cry for help, it sounded exactly like my voice. Not just vaguely similar, but a flawless replica of my tone, my diction, and even my breathing pattern. I stood rooted to the spot, breaking out in a cold sweat. The radio on my hip suddenly crackled, but it wasn't a signal from base. It transmitted a wet, squelching sound, like someone chewing on raw meat, mixed with heavy, panting breaths. From down in the ravine, my voice echoed again, but this time it wasn't calling for help. It dropped in pitch, deep, slow, and eerily resonant. "You know I'm here. Why don't you come down here with me?" At the exact same time, in the feeble light of the flashlight trembling in my hand, I saw a massive tree branch at the top of the ravine, slowly bending downward. No, it wasn't a branch. It was an arm. A long, blackened, emaciated arm, with half-meter-long fingers slowly gripping the cliff face, dragging a grotesque body up from the darkness. And then I saw its eyes, huge and glowing, red like burning coals, piercing right into me. Just like the 4-year-old boy's description years ago. I don't remember how I turned and ran. I threw away my flashlight, my backpack, running for my life, relying only on whatever memory I had left of the trail and the murky moonlight, until I finally saw the lights of the ranger station. The next morning, I placed my name tag and radio on my boss's desk. He looked at me, at my shredded uniform, and at my pale, bloodless face. He didn't ask a single question. He just nodded silently, opened a drawer, and pulled out a pre-printed resignation form, as if he always knew this day would eventually come. I left that forest forever, but the memories of it still haunt me every night. The only advice I can give you is this. If you ever go camping in a massive national park, never wander off the trail. And if you hear someone calling your name from deep within the darkness, especially if it sounds like the voice of a loved one or even your own voice, please never answer. Have you ever heard of the urban legends whispered strictly among the ranks of the National Forest Search and Rescue (SAR) teams? These are the bravest individuals, dedicating their youth to scouring every tree root, blade of grass, and deep ravine to find missing hikers. They have seen many bizarre things: hastily abandoned campsites, disembodied cries echoing from nowhere, or giant barefoot tracks in the snow. But all of that pales in comparison to them. If you go deep enough into the primeval forests, dozens of miles away from civilization, where sunlight cannot pierce through the dense canopy to touch the forest floor, occasionally you will stumble upon them, the stairs. Part 1. The Grotesque Anomaly. There is an unwritten rule, a life or death law that every veteran rescue officer whispers to the rookies on their very first night. If you see stairs in the woods, don't look at them for long, don't ask questions, don't take pictures, and absolutely never step on them. Close your eyes and imagine. You are trekking 15 miles deep into a 1,000-year-old virgin forest. There are no trails around you, no cell service, no power lines, no sound of traffic. There is only the damp smell of moss, wet earth, and ancient tree trunks so massive it takes 3 people to hug them. You are completely isolated from the human world. And then you part a thick patch of ferns, step into a clearing, and there it is, standing bare, utterly out of place, and grotesque, a flight of stairs. It is not the ruins of a burned-down colonial house or a crumbling castle. If it were a ruin, you would see foundations, rubble, collapsed walls, or a gray chimney. But no, there is absolutely nothing else around. Just a single set of stairs sprouting from the middle of the clearing, reaching up into the air, and then abruptly ending. Their appearances are incredibly diverse. Some look exactly like the wooden stairs of a modern 90s suburban home, covered in pristine white carpeting. Strangely, in the middle of a forest full of mud and rotting leaves, that carpet is clean enough not to have a single speck of dust, a fallen leaf, or an animal track on it, as if someone just vacuumed it 5 minutes ago. Others are made of cold, solid granite, intricately carved in vintage Victorian style. Sometimes they are rusty metal spiral staircases winding straight up into the sky through the canopy, or mossy brick steps leading straight down into an invisible basement beneath the earth. Part 2. The Dead Silence. Our storyteller could never forget the first time he encountered this phenomenon. It was his 2nd year on the search team. The objective was a 7-year-old boy who had wandered off while camping with his family. It was twilight. He and his veteran captain were struggling to push through the tangled underbrush when suddenly the world around them shifted. Every single sound died. It wasn't the normal silence of nature, when wild animals catch the scent of an apex predator. It was a suffocating, dense, heavy silence that pressed against the eardrums, as if someone had just vacuumed all the air out of the space. The cawing of crows stopped abruptly. The chirping of crickets vanished. Even the rustling of the wind through the leaves ceased. His heart pounded wildly in his chest, and that was the only sound he could hear. In the middle of the clearing ahead, about 20 paces away, stood a staircase covered in crimson carpet. It was flawless, brand new, its plush steps rising about 10 feet before ending suspended in midair. Hovering around it was a deeply unnatural scent, the smell of ozone, like the air right before a lightning strike. Urged on by a strange magnetic pull, his curiosity slowly overtook his reason. The young man mindlessly lifted his foot, intending to step closer to see if the missing boy was hiding under the stairs. But instantly, A hand as rough as tree bark clamped down on his shoulder, yanking him backward violently. The grip was so tight he thought his collarbone was going to shatter. "Look away. Keep your head down. Do not look at it. We are going the other way right now," the captain hissed. The voice of a veteran who had faced life and death hundreds of times was trembling, his face drained of every drop of blood. They took a much steeper, longer detour just to avoid the radius of that area. That night, sitting by the flickering campfire in the freezing cold of the forest, the captain took a long drag of his cigarette before finally telling him the darkest secrets of the rescue team. The highly classified files that never make it into official reports. Why must you never step on them? What actually happens? Part 3. Those Who Climbed. The first case was about a young, impulsive, and arrogant rescue trainee. During a patrol, out of sheer curiosity and a desire to prove that the warnings of his seniors were just superstitious nonsense, he scoffed, ran up to a set of stark white stone stairs, and bolted straight to the top step. He stood up there, hands on his hips, laughing out loud and waving at his teammates with a defiant look on his face. But that smile vanished in a fraction of a second. Suddenly, his eyes rolled to the back of his head, exposing entirely the whites. He collapsed to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut, clawing frantically at his own throat, his mouth agape but unable to let out a single cry for help. He died instantly, right in front of the whole squad. The medical examiner later performed an autopsy and concluded that he died from a massive ruptured brain aneurysm, a death considered completely natural in medical terms. But the witnesses never forgot the look on his face when he died, his features contorted in absolute abyssal terror, as if he had just seen the most horrifying thing in the universe raining at the top of those stairs. Another case was even more tragic. A female medic on the team, disoriented in thick fog, lost her footing. Flailing for balance, she accidentally brushed her hand against the handrail of a scorched wooden staircase standing in the woods. She said the touch was freezing, like dry ice, accompanied by a static shock so powerful it threw her backward. Seconds later, the veins in her hand began to turn pitch black. The necrosis spread at a visible rate, from her fingertips, up her wrist, and crawling along her arm to her shoulder in less than 24 hours. At the hospital, they had to perform an emergency amputation of her entire left arm right at the shoulder joint to stop the unidentified toxin from reaching her heart and save her life. Physically, she lived, but mentally, she permanently lost her ability to speak. Since that day, she only sits huddled in the corner of a psychiatric ward, her vacant eyes staring into the void, occasionally shivering uncontrollably. But the most terrifying of all are the ones who actually walked up and vanished. The captain spoke of an old friend of his, a master tracker accompanied by his K9 dog. They found a rusty iron spiral staircase. The K9, usually fearless, suddenly tucked its tail, whined pitifully, and adamantly backed away, barking furiously at the empty air above the steps. His friend, wanting to get to higher ground to catch a radio signal that was picking up static, ignored the dog's warning and stepped up. First step, second step, third step, and then the air around him blurred, rippling like a heat mirage on an asphalt road in the middle of summer. He blinked and vanished. No sound, no scream, no flash of light or puff of smoke. The large 180-pound man, along with all his heavy rescue gear, evaporated into thin air right before his teammates' eyes in the blink of an eye. The K9 broke its leash, sprinting frantically toward the edge of the forest, and never dared to return. To this day, no one has found even a shred of fabric from that man's clothing. It was as if he had stepped through a tear in a different dimension and was swallowed whole. Conclusion: the law of the ancient woods. You see, the old forest existed millions of years before the first creature called human learned to stand upright on two legs. The forest has its own rules. There are ancient entities, traps, or glitches in space and time that our tiny brains are not allowed to understand, nor are we capable of comprehending them. These stairs, they are like the pitcher plants or giant corpse flowers of nature. They flaunt their absurdity, their perfect, beautiful contrast amidst the wild overgrowth, purely to provoke and attract the fatal curiosity of their prey. Once you set foot on them, you agree to sign a blood pact. You accept their rules of the game. So, if one weekend you decide to pack your bag and venture into the deep woods, veering off the safety of the marked trails, and you happen to cross paths with a perfectly intact flight of stairs standing bare in the wilderness, do not take a picture. Do not call out your friends' names. Do not let curiosity draw you near. Keep your mouth firmly shut. Lower your gaze to the dirt. Turn on your heel and walk the opposite direction as fast and as quietly as you possibly can. Because sometimes the scariest monster doesn't have sharp fangs or rending claws to tear you apart. Sometimes it is just a set of silent stairs, waiting patiently for centuries, just for you to get curious enough to step up. Tonight's story ends here. Make sure your bedroom door is locked tight. Good night, and see you in the next broadcast.